Hi, I'm Todd Burnson, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pagan Voice. February 2nd was the celebration of Imbolc, which is one of the 8 Sabbats that make up the pagan wheel of the year. We are joined by 2 pagans who will help us explore the significance of this Sabbat. Byron Ballard is a writer, urban farmer, and teacher who writes about traditional Appalachian witching and modern earth religions. She is an Appalachian witch and a Dianic priestess who co-founded the Coalition of Earth Religions for Education and Support. Byron, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Also joining us is Michael McDermott. Michael is a physician and a social activist who is the co-founder of the Black Earth Institute, served on the board of directors for Cherry Hill Seminary, and developed Bridget's Rest, a retreat for artists and activists in a setting of Celtic spirituality. Michael, welcome.
Happy to be here.
So Byron, what is Imbolc?
So Imbolc it's the very beginning of spring, but what it means to us as we see the visible signs of the new agricultural year is that it's a time when we can throw off some of the constraints that have been with us over the winter, whether they're physical or spiritual constraints or emotional constraints, and to be renewed.
Michael?
Imbolc, or as it pretty much goes in Ireland for the vast majority of the population, St. Bridget's Day, is the day that's associated with Imbolc, which is the spring and is a period of awakening from the winter. It's a period of rebirth.
I know that Bridget is closely tied to the Sabbat for many people. Can you explain that tie between Bridget and Imbolc?
Well, Imbolc has traditionally been her feast day, and this was brought forward into the more modern world by Bridget the goddess becoming Saint Bridget. And because of that, so much was kept of the ancient lore that we might otherwise have lost. So it has always traditionally been her festival.
What is it about Bridget, do you think, that seems to resonate so deeply with people?
She is an amazing divine presence because she's the goddess of fire and water. She's the goddess of smithcraft and beer and bread and healing and midwifery. And she has a lot of lore that comes with her. And she is extraordinarily modern in the sense that Catholics in Ireland, she is the second saint of Ireland after Patrick. And she was, of course, decanonized decades ago. But she is immediate and modern for a lot of people, which is really nice. We tend to get a little sword and sorcery in the pagan community, and it's all through this romantic lens of what the medieval world was, or even more ancient world was. And so it's nice to have this divine that feels very immediate and modern.
Okay, so what is it about Imbolc that is symbolically relevant to many of today's pagans who live in an urban environment?
I think you identify a real interesting issue, which is many folk practices which hint at the pre-Christian traditions are land-based. And I think that the desire to have things rooted in place is a strong desire. And perhaps the idea that there is a time that is flowing by, perhaps that's attractive.
Okay, I want to thank both of you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much.
Between 1647 and 1663, Connecticut tried 34 people for witchcraft and hanged 11 of them. The last people executed were Mary Barnes of Farmington and Rebecca and Nathaniel Greensmith of Hartford. On January 25th, 1663, it was a dark but important time in Connecticut's history. Now, 350 years later, the writer, actor, and producer Virginia Woolf brings their stories to the stage in the Farmington Witch Project, A Night of Enlightenment. Virginia, welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us about your production.
The performance piece is called Panic in Connecticut, Accused Witches Have Their Say. And what I've done is done a lot of research on the Connecticut witchcraft panics, which not many people know much about. Everybody knows about Salem, Massachusetts. But in all reality, here in Connecticut, the first person to be hanged for witchcraft in New England, really in America, was here in Connecticut, in Windsor, Connecticut, Alice Young in 1647. So I did a lot of research, and finally by the end chose 5 stories that I thought by the time they get all put together will really give people a sense of the world and what that was like to be accused of witchcraft.
Well, the Salem witch trials are well known, but most people don't really think about witch trials happening in other areas of the U.S.
Yeah.
What motivated the witch trials in Connecticut?
Well, one has to remember that women were being suspected of and executed for witchcraft going way back in time. The people that came to the New World from England, already there was a long history of more burning of people, and mostly women, as witches. The Puritans truly believed there was a devil. They believed that he was at work. They believed that bad things happening were the acts of the devil about in their world. They didn't have the science. They didn't have the understanding of the natural world that we have now. They were on the cusp of it. By the early 1700s, a lot more was being understood. So you have a couple of things at work that they truly did think that they were doing good by ridding their communities of the devil.
So is there a short piece of your performance that you could share with us today that kind of captures the essence of what was going on during that time?
Sure. Well, let's see. My narrator, Mary Staples, kind of opens the entire show trying to set the stage for what it was like. And it was a very frightening time for many of us English colonists. Sickness and death were common. We were surrounded by dark woods in which lived natives, hostile and outlandish. Even many of our neighbors were strange, some of them being Dutch. The Dutch were at war with England, and we liked them not. Weather was harsh, food was scarce, the future uncertain. We are Puritans. Many of us came from England to practice our faith without interference from the English king. We believe in God and in the devil, who tempts us and brings misfortune to all. We have strict rules that guide our way of dress and our way of life, ensuring humility. Although man may be above all other creatures, he will always be subordinate to God. Our ministers are closest to God, and they guide us. Our husbands are close to our ministers, and we women, well, our job is to serve our God and our husbands, to lead good Christian lives, to raise our children to be good Christians, and to work hard without complaint. So that sort of sets the world they were in, and the role of women in that world. Women were not appreciated if they were outspoken, if they were very strong, if they were very independent. That's not what they were supposed to be.
Well, this sounds like an amazing project. Thank you for joining us today. More information about the Farmington Witch Project can be found on their website at www.herstorytheater.com. In Nepal, a new government regulation allows transgender citizens to choose a third gender on their national identity cards, rather than having to identify as male or female. This move follows a measure that was implemented last year to recognize a third gender in their nation's census, and more than 5 years after Nepal's Supreme Court ordered the enactment of laws to guarantee the rights of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender individuals. What makes this story even more incredible is that homosexuality itself was only decriminalized in 2007, when the monarchy in Nepal ended. In only 5 short years, Bhumika Shrestha, a transgender woman, has been elected as the member of Nepal's Congress Party. The Supreme Court has protected the rights of same-sex couples to live together. The Nepal Tourism Board has announced plans to promote Nepal as a gay-friendly tourist destination. And according to reports in the Hindustan Times, the new national constitution will legally recognize same-sex marriages. All in 5 years. To put this into perspective, the monarchy ended in the United States in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights was ratified as part of the U.S. Constitution in 1791. That was 222 years ago, and we have just elected our first openly gay woman to the U.S. Congress. And as a nation, we still don't recognize gay marriages. For reasons largely associated with power and privilege, many religious, political, and community leaders promote the idea that we need to fear those who are different from ourselves. Although it is widely recognized by biologists that diversity in nature is a strength and not a sin or evidence of moral decay, that same recognition is too often dismissed when it comes to people. My hope is that the mighty America, who boasts of being a beacon of freedom in the world, may perhaps be able to accomplish in 225 years what Nepal has been able to accomplish in 5. More to come.
Hello, I am Brianna Cruzan. Joining me today is Steven Posch, a local pagan scholar who has been active in the community for over 30 years. We will be examining paganism in the Baltic region, how it differs from the pagan movement here in America, and what we have to learn from Baltic tradition. Steven, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brianna. It's a pleasure.
So first of all, tell us a little bit about Baltic tradition.
The culture of the Baltics is suffused by the old ways. It is culturally omnipresent. This is a matter of historical circumstance in some ways. I think there are 3 major factors leading towards it. The first is that the Baltics were among the last parts of Europe to be Christianized. The Duchy of Lithuania was not officially Christianized until the 15th century. And there is documentation of, well, into the 17th century, and I've heard even into the early 20th century, when the rains had stopped and the crops were drying up, the old men would take the bull into the forest and sacrifice it to Perkunas, the thunderer, and presumably then it would rain. And if these things didn't work, we wouldn't keep doing them, I suppose. So, The interruption, what I call the Great Interruption, between the end of the old paganism and the beginning of the new paganism was much shorter there than it was in other areas. And so paganism has remained culturally present both in the visual culture of Baltic folk arts, where each of the old gods has symbols associated with him or her. And these have been handed down in wood carving and in textile arts as well, in embroidery and in weaving. So they were very present visually. And in addition to which, the folk songs of Latvia and Lithuania, which are called the dainas, the old gods are frequently remembered in them. And these songs have been sung continuously from who knows how long to the present day. So there was both a literary and a visual artistic tradition that enabled people to reach back into the near past and recontact these old ancestral traditions.
So the pagan movement in places like Latvia is much more prevalent than it is here in America, would you say? Mm-hmm. Or do you think, or is it more that they just had their cultural history to draw upon that was more available to them?
It is so much a part of the culture there that everyone, regardless of what their professed religious background is, recognizes these symbols, understands them. And the visual symbols in particular are everywhere. They are on clothing, they are on books, they are on billboards, they are on architecture. Gardens are designed in these forms. When you go into the supermarket and pull a box of breakfast cereal off the shelf, it is decorated with the symbol of the grain god. And everyone recognizes that this is a shared inheritance here. The biggest holiday of the year in the Baltics is Midsummers. And apparently, Riga is really the only large city in Latvia, but apparently it's like the Twin Cities on the 4th of July. Riga just empties out over the weekend of Midsummers, and for 4 days, the holiday continues. Apparently, if you fly over Latvia at that time, you can the bonfires extend to the horizon. It's sort of.
I think it's. I don't know, this sort of romantic feeling in me. I'm like, how awesome would it be if we here in America had something like that, where we were able to draw on a tradition that had been ongoing and had never, like you said, the Great Interruption. I feel like when our ancestors came to America, there was another interruption. First you had the Inquisition in the old European countries, then you had another interruption to tradition and cultural inheritance, which came with us moving here to America. And I feel like we're kind of searching, who do we look to for guidance in our pagan community, and how do we grow? Talk to me just a little bit more about how you see neo-paganism developing here in America versus what they have in the Baltic countries.
My travels in pagan Europe, and of course there are pagan communities in every European country, and many non-European countries as well, I'm painting with a very broad brush here. You understand? I'm railroading over nuance like you wouldn't believe. But it seems to me there is much more of a sense in Europe, as you have articulated, of connectedness to the place, connectedness to the ongoing traditions of this place and our people and these languages in particular. And of course, as you pointed out, the great journey to the New World has created deracination. How could it not? And so that's a challenge. We don't have a pantheon designated for us, except I would contend that we do. But we don't have immediate cultural precedents to draw on, except I would contend that we do. I see the paganisms, and of course one needs to speak in the plural here, to engage a very old metaphor here. They're kind of a place, each of the paganisms is a place where three roads meet, what the witches in England call a three-went, a place where the crossroads have always been a place of great power and intensity and sanctity. And so the three roads that converge in the modern paganisms, and the ancient ones for that matter as well, I think are the individual and the individual's experience, because unless you're feeling it, what good is it? The ancestral traditions, the received tradition that we have, which of course in Europe is much more immediate and direct, and also the natural world, the place itself. And in order to have a holistic and healthy paganism, one needs all three. So here in the United States, we have ourselves and our own experience, and of course we have the place. We need to be listening to the place. What, as American pagans, we need to do is put our roots down here, because it's very clear from history that when human beings travel, we take our mythologies with us. We bring our gods along with us. How could we not? And so, to a certain degree, we need to be paying attention to the received traditions, to that corpus of ancestral lore that has come down to us from the old country. However, we also need to add to that the traditions of the local places. All paganisms, I'm going to contend, are by nature tribal and local. There's no such thing as a universalist paganism.
So are you suggesting then that part of the pagan experience here in America is looking into the Native American traditions?
No.
Okay.
Vine Deloria says in his amazing book, God is Red, he asked that question himself in the last chapter, here is where incoming Americans, use that phrase to distinguish from indigenous Americans, they need to put their roots down here. They need to develop a spirituality of this place, but they cannot do that by culturally imperializing native cultures. We incomers have our own native traditions, and we at one point our ancestors were practicing Native European religion as Native Americans' ancestors were practicing Native American religion. We need to bring this along. Of course, we need to know the local lore. We need to honor it, and we need to respect it, and we need to learn from it. But to adopt someone else's culture, someone else's myths, someone else's stories wholesale, I think is tremendously irresponsible. An example. One of the preeminent local holy places here in the Midwestern North America is, of course, the Black Hills of South Dakota. Every tribe understands that this is a sacred place. All of them tell different stories about this sacred place. All of them have different mythological reasons why this is a sacred place, but they all agree that this is a sacred place. So what the new pagans of this place, those of us with our ancestry from other parts of the world, need to do is to develop, we need to be asking ourselves questions about, clearly this is a sacred place. A sacred place is a sacred place. We need to be asking ourselves, what are our stories about the Black Hills? And one of the ways that we do that is by looking at the ancestral traditions from the old country and asking us, how do these apply?
So updating, looking at what the old country has to offer and sort of updating the myths
and seeing
and practices.
Well, and seeing how they apply here.
Okay.
I think. It would be a mistake if we took Baltic paganism lock, stock, and barrel and tried to transplant it here, especially for those of us such as myself who don't come from an ethnic Baltic background and who don't speak any of the Baltic languages. But we can be informed by them and what they did. In the English-speaking world, the new paganisms, more or less, they started about the middle of the 20th century and have been going since then. In the Baltics, they started between the wars, back in the 20s. And so we're new pagans, and so are they, but they've been doing it for a generation longer than we have. So if we look at how they've managed to successfully integrate this into the overculture, I think we can take this as a prototype of how to go about naturalizing our ancestral traditions here.
So I know you brought something with you today to illustrate the point of continuity and symbols and what is old and what is new. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Things that look old and new at the same time, the aesthetic of this entire movement. This is an inlaid wood box from Latvia, probably from the 1920s sometime, definitely from the Baltic Renaissance, when nationalist and traditional pagan materials flowed in to the culture and became its heart. It is inlaid rather with the symbol of the moon. Okay. As you can see, the waxing moon, the full moon here in the middle, and then the waning moon. And I love the rectilinearity of it. You can see that many of these symbols have come down in textile arts, so hence the rectilinearity. But what I particularly love about it, this is a cash box. See, there's room for the paper money and for the coins, and then of course I suppose you put the bills up here. But the question that I asked myself when I first saw it is, why would you make the moon the patron goddess, or in this case a god? The moon is masculine in Baltic cultures, the patron of cash flow. And well, let me ask the question to you. What is the logical connection here? Do you see it?
Well, I mean, you talk about flow. I mean, are we talking about the ebb and flow of things? You talk about tides. The tide comes in, the tide comes out. Are you suggesting that symbolically there's an energetic connection between the phases of the moon and the way cash flows in our lives?
Let's say at least a symbolic.
Okay.
That I would be willing to commit to vis-a-vis energy. Some would say yes, some would say no. But yes, that's precisely it. The moon, etymologically, if you trace the word moon back 5,000 years to Proto-Indo-European, it means the measurer. And the moon, of course, waxes and wanes. And so it's a very modern idea that growth is infinite. And, the money that we make will just continue increasing forever. Of course, the pre-modern view and the postmodern view, we understand that actually resources are limited. This is not it's a matter of ecology, and no economy can continue to grow forever. And so the money that we have will wax and wane, and at some point you'll have a little bit, and at some point you'll have a lot of it, and then it may well wane away again. But of course, the moon moves in a cycle, so we have that continuity there. So this beautiful moon that's up in the sky suddenly becomes personally engaged in your own finances, in your everyday life. Imagine having everything around you in your life engraved with meaning, as this box is. It would change your attitude towards money. It would change your attitude towards the moon.
I'm really fascinated by this box that you found and the idea of imbibing the different parts of our lives with symbols that help us to remember the meaning of things. I feel like in America we're completely disconnected from the meaning of things. All of our clothes has brand names on it, some guy that designed it or some company, and it really has very little meaning, aside from maybe Nike. You know, Nike is an actual goddess of athletics, yes. You know, but, you know, nobody really knows that. So I really think that part of the pagan movement today is taking a look at how we can imbibe meaning into our everyday things, because I really feel that's lacking in our day-to-day culture.
To keep reminding us, remember,
exactly.
Notice.
Help us to remember.
These relationships are real, pay attention. Here they are. That's one of the things it can do for us.
Thank you, Steven, for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. More to come from the Pagan Voice in just a moment.
Welcome. I'm Michelle Plug, and this is As We See It. During this part of the show, we will discuss a few topics that are impacting the world today. I would like to start today by discussing the movie release of Hansel and Gretel. Last Friday, director Tommy Wirkola took the classic children's story of Hansel and Gretel to a new realm of possibility. Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters is a film that complicates folklore, fantasy, and reality, making the understanding of the term witch even more confusing.
I gotta tell you guys that when I went to go see this movie, I wasn't sure I was gonna make it all the way through. I mean, there's a lot of blood. I mean, the first two words I would use to describe this film are gratuitously bloody, you know, and that kind of made me sick to my stomach, and that aspect of alone makes me not want to recommend this movie to anybody. Then there's the whole aspect of all of the witches in this movie are female, and for the first half of it, they're all evil witches. And I thought, what kind of stereotypes does this promote, that, you know, there are these evil witches portrayed in this way? Is this really a good movie, or is this like a step backwards for, I don't know, our kind, if you will?
Yeah, I think had this been any other population, like if this would have been, you know, Hansel and Gretel Jew Hunter, people would have freaked out, right? I mean, if it was any other marginalized group, people would have been rioting in the streets. But for, you know, in our society, it's still okay to portray people who are pagan as, you know, as these people that have signed an evil pact with Satan and deserve to be ripped apart with a Gatling gun.
Do you think that there is any type of distinction in society between what a mythological witch is in a movie and what a witch is considered in a pagan tradition?
Well, I think what this film does is, you know, this really reinforces what people hear on Sunday when they go to church, right? You know, and our society gets a lot of its information about how to frame things and understand things through the media, and film is a very powerful way to kind of frame what's happening in the world and how we should understand our world. And so when you take witches and you frame them as these evil beings that deserve to be killed, and then we wonder, why do people go into schools with guns and just start rattling people off? You know, where does that come from? Well, it comes from crap like this.
Yeah, and I did think it was extremely bloody and gory. I was not expecting that. That's something I'll say. I was expecting it to still be a little bit more childlike and animated, like the story. So in 3D, there was blood flying at my face and stuff happening that I did not see coming. I didn't find it necessarily offensive in the terms, because I distinguish a mythological witch in storybooks from witches as we are, like human, you know, witches. So I don't find that as offensive, but that's because I was raised in a generation where they were only fairy tale characters, right? So I don't see that, I see a distinction between the two. Do I think the rest of society does? Probably not, which is why we still have random people doing witch beatings in India and things like that, because they do believe that that is what a witch is. You
know, halfway through the film, they did finally introduce some good witches, and that that for me kind of started to redeem the movie just a little bit. Because if there was no good witches in it at all, I would have been way more upset than I am. And, at first I had that same question in my mind. Well, these are obviously fantastical witches. They are supernatural witches, and therefore there's an element of fiction here that, okay, it doesn't, it's clear to me that it doesn't reflect reality, especially because it's based on, a fairy tale. So for that reason, I wasn't immediately offended. But then when I was watching it and it's gory, and there's this one scene where, this whole flock of them are being shot down with a Gatling gun, and I just thought, okay, regardless of whether or not that they're shooting a witch population or a Jew population or a black population or a bunch of babies population, it doesn't really matter. They're showing that it's okay for the hero of the story to mow down who they consider to be the villain of the story in whatever way they see fit. And I kind of take issue with that just a little bit.
Yeah, and this makes me actually think of how they do other movies such as Django Unchained. I don't know if either of you saw that, but it's extremely violent and bloody and disgusting. But a lot of that violence is about releasing slaves from slavery back in those days. So it's like they're coming from a different perspective with the violence, where this was definitely like, we're gonna kill all these witches. It wasn't, I feel like there is a difference in the mentality behind it, is they're still making all witches this demon evil.
Well, and conflict is part of humanity, right? And I think that sometimes when you have a civilization that has to move to another level, there's some conflict. I mean, look at the civil rights movement. There was conflict around that. That's very different than what this film was doing. I mean, this film was really showing that that it's okay to just demonize and see others that you don't like as evil, and that you somehow have God on your side, or some degree of righteousness that just allows you to do that, and you're the hero for it.
But I mean, conversely, the way that villains are portrayed is that they have the same power.
Yes.
They are imbibed by their God to do whatever they desire, and I feel like everyone feels that they're right, and everyone decides which side that they're on, and sometimes the bad guys think they're the good guys, and vice versa. And I think that's actually a huge issue.
Yeah, absolutely, because they definitely in this movie were portrayed as having these evil intentions.
Yeah.
The witches were, so it was kind of the good versus evil. And, well, I'm not going to blow the movie for people who haven't seen it, but twist at the end that it does end up being there are good and evil witches in the movie. All right, so coming to our next topic, Defense Secretary Leon Panetta has announced the lift of the ban on women in combat. This will allow women to take posts that were not available in the past, including frontline positions. The physical standards for each post will be upheld for all persons. There are critics of this decision for various reasons, including pregnancy, women having to engage in hand-to-hand combat with male enemies, and lack of separation for privacy and hygiene purposes. Panetta said at a Pentagon news conference, the department's goal in rescinding the rule is to ensure that the mission is met with the best qualified and most capable people, regardless of their gender.
I kind of see two sides of this. There's a part of me that looks at the bigger issue around equality, and I applaud this decision on those grounds, because I think that gender should not be a consideration when looking at whether somebody is qualified for a position or not. Just like with equal pay, gender should not be a consideration when it comes to paying for the value of somebody's services and their work. My concern about this is the implementation of this, and how women who are in the military may experience challenges to their own personal safety around this, and not even necessarily from the enemy, but from people within the military. There is already just a humongous problem with sexual assaults and sexual harassment that occurs within the military. Part of that has to do with, I think that people, are under a tremendous amount of stress, away from home, in a hostile territory, and so their normal moral compass gets a little bit disrupted. But I think there has to be a lot of work done on, kind of the logistics of this, just to ensure their safety.
Yeah, and that gets me just fired up to begin with, because why does that need to happen in the military in the first place, with all the sexual assault and rape and things that happen to women that join the military, and it is on the same side. And part of this is defending our own. That's why we have a military. How is that in alignment when you're assaulting your own? So that just gets me fired up to start with.
Right. Oh,
but
totally.
I do see definitely with women going into these special operations and things like that, sometimes they are out on missions for long extended periods of time, and they're not going to have privacy. You know, they'll be popping a squat, you know, behind wherever in plain sight. So there won't be the privacy, but they're choosing that. They have the opportunity to choose.
Right. There's two things I kind of want to speak to, and the first one is that, you know, with them opening it up for women to be able to be in combat, that means that women will now be eligible to be promoted within the military, because that was a huge issue before, where, you know, there were no female leaders within the military because they weren't eligible for the positions that were also eligible for promotion. So there's that piece of it, and I think that this is great, because I would really like to see more women in positions of power, just to see how the way that we deal with war and conflict shifts because of that, because women are going to bring their own perspective. The other thing, though, is that, I mean, aside from some of the danger that women face, whether in combat or from, you know, malicious intent within our own ranks, there's those good guys that are chivalrous, that don't want to see a woman get hurt. They don't want to see they don't want to carry a woman's body home. They're going to spend more time trying to defend her in combat than dealing with whatever they're supposed to be dealing with. And so there's multiple levels of, what's the word I want? There's challenge with trying to really integrate a military that's about the people and not, you know, gender. And actually, there's one more thing. There's one more thing I want to talk about. Support your female military, and here's why. They are not provided with things like tampons and pads for when they're menstruating. They need the help from us at home to send them these sorts of things. There's all kinds of websites out there where you can look and see what the troops need, and definitely consider giving to the females in the military. Thank you. Sorry, I had to say that.
All good. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more from the Pagan Voice. A Catholic hospital argues that fetuses are not persons with legal rights in order to win a wrongful death lawsuit in Colorado. Jeremy Stodghill filed a lawsuit after his wife Lori died in 2006 due to a blockage in her main artery. She was 7 months pregnant with twin boys when she went into the hospital. Stodghill argues that the obstetrician on call had ample time to get to the hospital to perform a C-section and save his sons' lives. The doctor did not make it, and the sons died in Lori's womb. St. Thomas Hospital takes the usual stance of Catholic churches against abortion. They do not perform abortions and believe that a human has rights upon conception. State law does not protect the rights of unborn persons.
I have one word for you guys. Hypocrisy! Right. I mean, can you believe that? I mean, make up your mind.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like they're using the law as it's convenient for them. You know, and if it were any other case, they would be definitely, you know, we do not believe in abortion. If it were any other case, but because if they take that stance, they would clearly be in the wrong with this particular case. They're trying to manipulate what they can to come out on top, and I'm like, why? Why did you not try to save these babies? Why? What?
Yeah, and stick with your guns on it. Like,
right?
If you're saying, like, I'm a church and I have these views and I want to implement them and bring them into the law. I mean, that's one of their ultimate goals, is to have that be the law. How can you back out when it's actually becoming a legal battle?
Right.
Pay the money, you know?
Right. And that's what the hypocrisy of this, I think, is just is so striking. Because, I mean, the refusal of providing, abortion services, the refusal to provide any kind of contraception, and this whole thing about conception begins at life, and no matter what we do, we're going to combat these horrible abortions and all of that because a fetus is a human being, right? Until it's inconvenient for them, And now it's like, oh no, just kidding.
And we're not talking about like a fetus at just conception. We're talking about 7 months old.
Viable.
Yeah, and they're able to deliver babies at 3 months right now, and they survive. I mean, we're talking about almost fully grown babies in the womb. Right. And it's insane to me that all of a sudden they have this convenient excuse to ride that wave.
There was an interesting, it wasn't St. Thomas Hospital, but there's another hospital out on the East Coast that not too long ago, just a couple of months ago actually, where there was a woman who she was starting to hemorrhage, and she was pregnant, and she was fairly late in their last trimester of pregnancy, and she was sitting there just saying, take the baby, because she wouldn't survive if they didn't do something. But all of the hospital staff just sit there waiting until the fetus's heartbeat stopped before they would perform an abortion, because they wouldn't perform an abortion. And the woman ended up dying, so did the baby. They both ended up just dying. And, and now for them to come back and say, that oh no, fetuses
what
aren't
gives you the right to decide who does and doesn't get to die?
Right.
Where do you have that power? Who gave that to you? I mean, that just, it makes me angry, and and it makes it so I'm not even sure what else to say. I mean, it just makes me so angry that they would just decide that they have the power, who gets to die and who doesn't. I can't buy into that. I
think that's a lot of the argument on their side, though, is that we don't have the rights to abortions because we don't decide when life begins.
But the thing of it is that this isn't about an abortion. This is about babies that could have been saved with a C-section. Okay, this has nothing to do with whether or not we want to abort this fetus or the babies were wanted or unwanted. They were clearly wanted by the father. That's why he's suing, because this hospital now has stolen a piece of his life.
Absolutely, and they clearly could have been saved, and they clearly could be alive and well little beings in his life, and instead they didn't do it for whatever reason. The doctor couldn't get there, and they should just cough up the money, stick to their guns that those fetuses have rights. And this is what we believe as a church, so we are going to pay. I mean, they have I think it's $15 billion to their disposal, and they can't cough up a couple million just to put this at rest.
Yeah, and what I find, sad about this whole thing is really this. There's kind of a religious fanaticism, I think, around abortion, and this whole idea of whether a woman has a right to an abortion or not. This particular instance is a little bit unusual, but I think that what it really illustrates is some of the hypocrisy that surrounds this particular issue.
Absolutely, and because the law actually supports them not showing up and delivering the babies, which is so fascinating to me that our law supports that, but there's such an argument and push against that law as it is.
Right.
It's so fascinating. So, moving on to our next topic. Harvard professor George Church is seeking a female volunteer to plant an embryo infused with Neanderthal DNA in her womb. Although his reasonings for resurrecting Neanderthals is somewhat unclear, there has been speculation that he is preparing humanity for an apocalypse. With whatever reasons he is interested in conducting this experiment, he seems to be adamant about making it happen.
Okay, first of all, can we just be done? Can we just be done? Can we just be done, okay, with apocalyptic thinking? We've been looking for the apocalypse for over 2,000 years. And even in the last 20 years, there have been several prophecies that have come and gone. And And I really feel like this is a self-fulfilling thing, where if we decide the world's going to end, it's going to affect how we respect the earth, how we treat our environment, how we treat our fellow man. And let's just be done. We can decide now that this is the beginning. This is the beginning of whatever we want it to be, and that's what we should be working towards.
Absolutely, because then there's no consequences. If the world's gonna end, we have no consequences for our actions, so we might as well just behave like a bunch of jerks.
Yeah,
right?
I don't see that happening in society.
Not at all. That's
I know,
not
right,
at all right now.
Well, and that's such non-pagan thinking to begin with, because in pagan tradition, everything is a cycle, right? There is no beginning and end, and so this whole notion that there's somehow an end of times, this big apocalypse, that's.
And secondly, isn't there some kind of ethical violation with working with embryos and DNA and building some superhuman race that you study in the lab? I mean, what are we doing to people? I mean, whether or not a Neanderthal baby ends up being born, okay, to prepare it for a life of being studied in the lab, I mean, that's taking away so many of its rights as a human being. And who would want to sign up to be the mother of that?
I'm sure there's somebody.
There's definitely going to be some. Well, there would have to be, right? There would have to be. And I think it's interesting because if the mother of this Neanderthal baby is going to be raising it in society while also going through scientific testing, that baby is still going to be a part of the society. It's not going to be raised with the same things that Neanderthals, the survival skills that they had back then, right? So it's still going to be a part of our society and having to integrate all of that we have.
And we clearly saw that outside of Geico commercials, there just aren't really very many opportunities. But in all seriousness, though, it's kind of like there's kind of this, everything that we can do is not necessarily something that we should do. And this just seems like just a weird thing to do.
It really does, and it makes me think about this whole bionic man thing. We're constantly looking for ways to augment our human capabilities, and I'm like, why? Why is this necessary? I feel like we're playing God here when we do these kinds of things, and why do we need that? Why do we need to be bigger, better, part machine, part Neanderthal, part space alien? I mean, why? What purpose does that really serve? If you look at everyone who's ever done drugs in sports, we talked about that last week or the week before, whenever we talked about it, maybe it was off camera, and I don't remember now. But these people are augmenting their abilities, and we don't really have a clear view of what the human body really is capable of of its own right now.
And the message that it carries is that being human is not enough.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And that I think is the real message here, that just being a human being is not enough. We've somehow got to either if we can't do steroids, or something else, it's like, there's got to be some.
Give me that Neanderthal DNA.
right. Look at the Neanderthals. It's weird.
I think that's a fabulous point. Is it continues to come back to not enough. A society in a mindset of scarcity.
Right.
And then there's no connection in that because we're constantly reaching and pulling to survive rather than just embodying love and generosity and humanity.
Right.
It's a major miss.
And in our culture, everything is about, no one is ever smart enough, no one is ever fast enough, no one is ever pretty enough, no one is ever enough of anything. And I think that this is just another example of how that plays out.
Absolutely. And I wanted to bring up just one more quick topic about the new app that was released that's creating all kinds of controversy, and it's the Make Me Asian app that Google released. Have you guys heard of this? What do you know about it?
Other than it takes stereotypical features and sort of plants them on your face. How is this acceptable? I don't understand. How is this acceptable to make fun of any racial group or any racial stereotype? Is it just satire? Do we just say this is just satire and it's funny and no one should read anything into it?
The thing about this app that is a little bit problematic is I know that the original intent was probably just to be satirical, but this is kind of satirical at the expense of another population that is that's somewhat marginalized in this country. I mean, in this kind of a similar vein as blackface, the blackface minstrel shows, was supposed to be this thing about black people, but it was actually kind of offensive, and I could see that this would be a bit offensive as well.
The only thing that it really brings up for me is if you're gonna have an app like that for one, do it for all. Have it be something that's funny to play on stereotypes everywhere.
We should do a Make Me Pagan app. What would that be like?
I wonder what that would be like. Karen Armstrong is a Christian religious thinker who has written more than 20 books on how different faith traditions have shaped world history. She was awarded the TED Prize in February 2008, and the wish that she was granted as part of the award was to bring world spiritual leaders together to find a way to foster global understanding and a peaceful world through the practice of compassion. The result was the drafting of a document called the Charter for Compassion, and to date, almost 100,000 people have signed the charter, including Queen Noor of Jordan, the Dalai Lama, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and Paul Simon. According to Armstrong, the Charter is a document that transcends religious, ideological, and national differences. Supported by leading thinkers from many traditions, the Charter activates the Golden Rule around the world. I'd like to take a minute to read the Charter as it speaks to a truth that must be embraced by all of us if we are to have a future of peace and prosperity. The Charter reads, "The principle of compassion lies at the heart of all religious, ethical, and spiritual traditions, calling all of us always to treat all others as we wish to be treated ourselves. Compassion impels us to work tirelessly to alleviate the suffering of our fellow creatures, to dethrone ourselves from the center of our world and to put another there, and to honor the inviolable sanctity of every single human being, treating everybody, without exception, with absolute justice, equity, and respect. It is also necessary in both public and private life to refrain consistently and empathically from inflicting pain, to act or speak violently out of spite, chauvinism, or self-interest, to impoverish, exploit, or deny basic human rights to anybody, and to incite hatred by denigrating others, even our enemies, is a denial of our common humanity. We acknowledge that we have failed to live compassionately and that some have even increased the sum of human misery in the name of religion. We therefore call upon all men and women to restore compassion to the center of morality and religion, to return to the ancient principle that any interpretation of Scripture that breeds violence, hatred, or disdain is illegitimate, to ensure that youth are given accurate and respectful information about other traditions, religions, and cultures, to encourage a positive appreciation of cultural and religious diversity, to cultivate an informed empathy with the suffering of all human beings, even those regarded as enemies. We urgently need to make compassion a clear, luminous, and dynamic force in our polarized world. Rooted in a principled determination to transcend selfishness, compassion can break down political, dogmatic, ideological, and religious boundaries. Born out of our deep interdependence, compassion is essential to human relationships and a fulfilled humanity. It is the path to enlightenment and indispensable to the creation of a just economy and a peaceful global community. Blessed be. Welcome to Viewer Mail. Today we're going to do something a little bit different than what we usually do, in that we had a couple of questions from our viewers that were asking a simple question. Is it possible to be a Christian and a pagan at the same time? So I thought that what we would do is actually talk about this a little bit as a group. And so we start with Michelle.
So my take on this is to answer that question with another question, which is, what do you define as Christianity and what do you define as paganism? And if we each take our own definition for those things, somebody could easily claim themselves as both, depending on how they define it. So I find a lot of similarities within a progressive Christian group to be similar to paganism. That of coming from more the message of Jesus and the all-encompassing God as a spirit and not as a hovering father figure. And with those similarities, I can see how you could be both And also the concept of taking care of the animals and the beings around us and the earth and each other. Those are all messages in Christianity that are often lost, but are also similar to paganism. So I can see that somebody being able to claim themselves as both.
I guess I have a little bit of a hard time with this because I feel like someone who's trying to claim both is basically saying that they're not comfortable enough to leave the familiarity of the church and to fully come out as pagan. It's like the argument of, well, are you really bisexual or are you just pretending and haven't come out of the closet yet? And for me, Christianity is about worshiping the Christ. The Christ is your savior. There's this whole idea of original sin that we have to overcome and transcend to become more godlike. And that simply doesn't exist in paganism. There is no original sin. There's nothing to be saved from. Although I will say, when I was having this kind of conversation with someone else, they said, but in your last show, you were talking about the orlog, which is the inherited family trauma, and could that not be equated to original sin? And I thought that was a really interesting point. So yes, it can be, with everyone being so eclectic these days and picking and pulling and choosing what they like and what they don't, it's easy to make up your own definition. But then I also kind of feel like, are you really following a tradition, or and how well does your pieces and parts really serve you as a holistic spirituality?
Yeah, I have a hard time really seeing how somebody could be pagan and Christian at the same time, because paganism is more of is a spiritual orientation that's a little bit different from the other Gnostic traditions. I mean, when we talk about a Gnostic tradition, we're talking about either the Abrahamic, which is like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, or the Dharmic, which is Hinduism, Buddhism. And with the Gnostic traditions as a whole, really focus on the whole idea of the transcendent divine. It's not that there isn't any divine that exists in the world, but there's really much more of a focus on the transcendent, and the physical is something to be overcome. It is, the fall of humanity, for example, that we're now in an earth, in this earth being, we are separated from the divine, and it's either through the church or through Christ that we can reconnect with the divine. In paganism, it's very different. There's not this idea that the divine is somehow separate from us, but rather it permeates us. It permeates the natural world. And so instead of having this orientation of seeking outward, we actually seek in the physical world, for divine experience. And the other thing that's a little bit different is, in the Gnostic traditions, they all have books that give teachings about, that came from a long time ago in a place far away that are supposed to give information about the realities of existence. And in paganism, there is no book, because it's a process of self-discovery through interaction with the divine in the place and time that you exist now, where that wisdom and the teachings of the divine are revealed to you. So what happened in another part of the world a long time ago, it's not that can't inform your life and philosophy, but what really matters is kind of the much more experiential piece. So I am one who I guess I don't see how that could happen. But everyone has their opinion, right? And that's actually it for today's show. I want to thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The Pagan Voice.